Good evening and welcome to VI Voices. I'm Emile Henderson III along with Clint Ferris and Boyd McFarlane. Yoki Hanley has the night off. Tonight we will continue our election coverage as we have with us Mr. Moleto Smith Jr., who is seeking the office of governor for the U.S. Virgin Islands in the 2014 general elections. We'll have him later on in the show. But tonight we'll begin our show as we do every night with our hot topics. And first up, the arbitrator's ruling in the VINGN former executive case, Moleto Francis, who was terminated by the board of VINGN after some issues. He filed suit with the arbitration board, and the decision came out today in which they found that the termination was not wrongful. And so, in other words, he loses, and that the board of VINGN were proper in terminating him. They cited a myriad of things that they said he did. One of those things being circumventing some of the procedures relative to federal funding. And he sued for defamation of character as well as for wrongful termination, and the arbitrator found or ruled against him. What are your thoughts on knowing what has been transpiring so far between NGN, locally, the issues with NGN and the recent RT Park issue? What are your thoughts on this arbitrator's decision? And apparently his decision, or her decision, excuse me, was very thorough in explaining why she was ruling against Mr. Francis.
Honestly, I don't have any opinion about the matter discussed. It's a labor dispute. It may be more than a labor dispute, because I remember when all of it came down, when there was some federal infractions, and the person that threw on the need the bus was Moleto Francis. That basically everything that was going wrong with VINGN was because of Moleto Francis. So maybe the arbitrator may have been wrong, but the ruling may be final.
No, it is final.
So it's
but what I find interesting is, remember when they had the whole legislative hearing on the issues when the VIN was first starting up.
Correct.
Because there was an issue where he allegedly filled out some forms saying that the funds that they were necessary to get the funding had been passed, which it hadn't. And they had this whole big hearing and for the legislature to backdate and go back and do stuff
Correct.
to make it appear.
And
so they were all involved in whatever it was. It didn't appear to me that he acted on his own in doing what he did.
So now that this is the case and they rule against him, let's just hope that the board has all their ducks in place in the event that he come back with some information regarding
the board.
some kind of
But what about the legislature who had oversight? I can remember Senator Malone was dead and center involved in it when they went back and backdate all of this stuff. So the legislature, actually, the 30th or 29th?
No, it would be the 30th.
The 29th.
29th?
29th.
28th.
This one coming in is going to be what? The
31st.
31st, so it's the 29th.
Yeah.
I understand. So they were complicit with what took place with VINGN. Because there was some wrongdoing. The federal government issued certain statements about what was taking place. They went, they met like the dead of night, did what they need to do, and sooner or later they saw Moleto Francis out. They brought somebody in.
Well, not somebody. They brought the guy from Avenza.
Okay.
The same one that was the campaign manager or through campaign parties for the governor.
Hey.
Kupfer.
Hey.
Correct.
So what you're trying to tell me? Something smells stink there?
Of course it does.
Come on,
And
man. Not with this administration. This one is the squeakiest clean administration I've ever seen.
So that's it.
No, man.
Let's not forget the $2 million issue as well.
What 2 million you talking about? 2 million plus the 500,000? Is there more?
Anyway, let me segue into what we're going to be doing.
Oh, come on.
For the next, I think we've exhausted the conversation
We have.
on the governor and his gate and money use or name use, whatever. Until somebody files charges against him for whatever he's done wrong, I'm exhausted with that conversation. I really, really am. Because I'm exhausted with it because he's blatant about doing these things that he's doing, and everybody's talking about the fact that they may be illegal. Blatant about it. When everybody's talking. I'm done talking. We've talked out. And so until somebody indicts him, or somebody, or the AG, or whenever you get an AG that went to do AG work, advise, which I said when you get one that will do work, charges him with a crime, then he's free to do whatever he wants.
So when you smell a big case?
I ain't smell nothing.
Well,
all I know is that we're in year 8, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And this gate thing began when he first got there.
Yeah,
like
by year 2, year 3.
Yeah.
Year 1.
No, year 1, but
He won him in year 1 good.
Yeah, it was year 1 good, but it was made public. About
Within months.
Within months.
It was
Within
made
months.
public within months. That's right.
Oh, we re-elected
Anyway, it
him.
was denied for
But
like maybe the first 6 or
We
7.
re-elected the gentleman, but one thing I have to say about, and I need to say about this administration, and I continue to feel it, is that this administration continues to be anti-working men and women in these Virgin Islands. And we have seen salaries eroded under this administration. We have seen the retreat of our salaries by 8%. No sooner than the salaries were reinstated for for government employees, you had premiums going up for health insurance. Inflation has steadily increased in the Virgin Islands. However, we have not seen salaries.
Well, you get what you vote for. And I think that is why it is so important that we're doing this show, because it's not now that he was against working people. The same working people who he's against is the same working people who run in November 2010 and re-elected him.
Thank God you're not showing what after me, boy.
I mean, showing no what. I'm just saying that you get what you vote for. Mm-hmm. What did he do in the second term that he didn't already do in the first? And I lay off people. What did he do? Did he not do in the second term that he did in the first?
That's hard. That's a very hard.
That's hard?
That's hard to actually come up with something different, because he did maintain course. He did hold serve. He continued to borrow. He continued to spend
all the stuff in his
everybody else's
all the stuff in his campaign
his.
where he said that he would never do that. That's not what he said when he was running. And he was not going to put this on the backs of our young people. And the first thing he goes and do is ask for money.
Correct.
To borrow money. How much money have we borrowed since he's been governor?
I think close to $1 billion.
Okay. And all he did was in October before the election give everybody retirement retroactive money that was their own money.
Borrow their money to
and
pay
as
off their money.
soon as he done, then guess what? I gotta lay people off, right? That won't happen. So you vote, you get what you vote for. I feel sorry for them. And so this is an election that you got to really pay attention and focus on who you're gonna be voting for, and don't be duped into nonsense because people promise you stuff. Ask them questions and get what you need to get to. Which I'm gonna segue into this issue of having no debates. I mean, I'm not even sure I'm in a primary, and I need to know if I'm in one, because I see nothing moving. Everything is all quiet, no debates, so you can hear, people actually debate issues, so you can test their intellectual acumen to see whether or not they know what they're talking about, or are they just going to go ahead and give pep rally talks to make you feel good?
Honestly, I think you're right, because I've asked this question: is there truly a primary taking place in about 40 days from now or less? I can say it doesn't appear so. I'm not seeing a hubbub of activity. I'm not seeing anybody on their soapbox gatherings. I'm not seeing any sort of those political activities to indicate that we are in a primary and we have a mountain of candidates contesting for these seats. Because even in the gubernatorial race, look at that, you have 6 teams vying
for the Democratic Party
alone. And you're not hearing any. You have heard some political advertisements from the candidates that you consider B candidates, or the candidates that may not contend for the top seat. But beyond that, you're not seeing anything.
Who is it up to hold? Which organization or what organization? And who is it up to hold?
This is chiefly this is the Democratic primary.
So
you'd expect the Democratic Party to make sure they educate the public on what the issues are and who the candidates in the party is, so
and
they can make
why their candidate, whomever that person is and wins, is the person that you should vote for.
Thank you. I'm not even seeing a major attempt to convince ICM candidates and independent candidates and no party candidates to go out to the election office and vote and change their voting status and become Democrats, so they can actually be in the primary. It may be taking place, but I'm not seeing a public attempt to do so. I'm not seeing a marshalling of the resources to collectively bring people out and get people energized and motivated about this primary. And that's my problem. That's a challenge to me. So what I'm seeing is a conspiracy, and people are going to say, "You're always seeing conspiracy, Clint." It is a conspiracy.
Well,
and the candidates and some of these lesser known candidates should be concerned.
Well, what's the conspiracy?
The conspiracy is that maybe one or two people that they already picked to identify that they may win the gubernatorial race, so we're going to protect them.
Because you don't want to have weaknesses.
Yes, you don't want to be seen weak to the independent candidates that are coming up.
Except you already know the weaknesses. I mean, if you didn't know the people, then I guess you could say, okay. But I think you kind of already know, at least for the ones who I think they want to win. Right. You already know what their weaknesses are. I mean, it's not a secret.
If you're alive and you're paying attention, it's not.
Honestly, if you were in a fight and you're a boxer, you realize that the Democratic Party as a boxer has already flinched. They've already showed you that they can't spar with you because they're afraid to let their best candidates even to spar within themselves.
Right.
Well,
they refused to have wasn't there some issue the other day when it was refused to have questions or something to ask something?
Huh?
There was an issue the other day when they refused to ask questions, when it wasn't allowed to ask questions or something like that.
I can't recall, but I'm going to tell you this. This is the same party. This is the same party that had the gubernatorial nominee named John DeYoung, had a debate with Kenneth Mapp in 2010, and then they hide all the tapes and never put it out there for the people to see. No, so it's just telling me this party is just full, and I can't remember the Democratic Party now. So I'm talking about myself here. We need to step up to the plate and do better.
I agree. And one of the things that we are doing here is ensuring that we are bringing to you the people who are going to ask for your vote. And whether they have a debate or not, we're at least going to be asking them questions to see what their intellectual acumen is and how well they know the issues. And you can make your decision based on that. And so when we return, we will have Moleto Smith back in a moment. Good evening and welcome back to VI Voices. We have with us Moleto Smith Jr. As I said earlier in our introduction, he is seeking the gubernatorial seat for the 2014 election, and he is here tonight, and he will be here to talk with us a little bit so we can get to know him and you can get to know him and hear what his views are on the issues before us. Mr. Smith, good evening and welcome to VI Voices.
And good evening to each of you. It's a pleasure being here. I know we've had a little scheduling mix up, but I'm privileged and honored to be here. I had an opportunity to hear the hot topics, and the hot topics were hot and passionate, so I'm anticipating that we will have a very engaged, a very open, a very robust and off-the-cuff discussion about the issues that matter to those of us in the Virgin Islands, particularly the Democratic voters, who in 40 days will be making their decision as to who their slate of nominees will be, including the office of governor and lieutenant governor, to which Hubert Frederick, my lieutenant governor candidate, and I are seeking. So thank you for the opportunity, and good evening to all of the listeners, the viewers, I should say, and special good evening to my wife and my daughter, who I know will be watching the YouTube.
Good. Now, for many who may not know who you are, why don't you take this time to share with them a little bit of who you are, and why are you seeking this office?
Thank you for the opportunity. I am 50 years old. I was born in the city of Brooklyn, New York. My mother is Daisy Elizabeth King. She was born on the island of Antigua. In 1961 or so, after graduating from nursing school at the University of West Indies, she relocated to St. Thomas. Met my father, who is Emile A. Smith Sr., who is from the island of Tortola, a British Virgin Islander. Became pregnant with me. About 7 months into her pregnancy, she was accepted into graduate school and moved to New York, and therefore her first son was born in Brooklyn. At approximately 6 months old, I returned to the Virgin Islands. I'm actually here on St. Croix. Lived for a brief period in my early youth on St. Croix. I'm a Caribbean man. Okay, my roots are in the Greater Virgin Islands, go back at least 200 years. My roots in the Caribbean itself extend back further than that. I'm the former Deputy Acting and Interim Commissioner of the Department of Human Services. I served in that capacity from 1993 until my departure from government in 2010. After leaving government, I ventured into the private sphere. I'm a licensed consultant. I'm licensed in the British Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as Antigua. I do a lot of work in the areas of strategic planning, financial planning, all the things I did in the public sector. Primarily, I do as a consultant in the Caribbean. They've taken a sabbatical from consulting in the U.S. Virgin Islands to announce my candidacy and to run for office. My candidacy began formally on January 10th of last year, January 10th, 2013. We announced my candidacy at the Windward Passage Hotel on St. Thomas to a standing room crowd of over 150 persons. On the date of my announcement, our website went live, and the website is moletosmithforgovernor.com. That's MOLETO smithforgovernor.com. Our position papers went out, our resumes, my resume, I didn't have a lieutenant at the time, went out, our strategic vision statements went out, and the campaign began. Since that time, I have met with thousands and thousands of people throughout the Virgin Islands. We are running what I call an old-fashioned grassroots campaign. A campaign that is sorely lacking in the Virgin Islands, the one that I hadn't seen in at least the time that I've been back in the Virgin Islands. I am a graduate of the University of California, Irvine. I worked in the private sector for approximately 10 years before returning to the Virgin Islands. I worked for companies such as McDonnell Douglas Computer System, Scantron Corporation, British Telecom North America, and I returned to the Virgin Islands after having to make a decision. I was given an opportunity to oversee the Midwest division of what is British Telecom North America. We were to move to Chicago area, and I decided that if I'm going to make such a big investment and such a big move for a company, it's best to come home and make that investment and that input to the Virgin Islands. I have been the president of the United Way, vice president of United Way, currently serve as the chairman of the board for the St. Thomas East End Medical Center. I've been on numerous boards of nonprofit organizations. In my capacity as deputy commissioner, I work with just about every nonprofit organization in the Virgin Islands up to and including 2010, in the capacity of structuring and providing grants and then overseeing and monitoring their programs. I know the Virgin Islands very well. I have an expansive family on St. Croix, from Mid-Island all the way into the west, Frederiksted area. In my capacity with the government, I traveled here at least 2 or 3 days a week. So I know St. Croix well. I'm very familiar with the people. As many would know, human services, many know human services for the benefits programs, which are food stamps and now medical assistance. But there are many other programs that they had offered, such as the youth programs at the Kings Hill area, the YRC activities, the Herbert Grigg Home, the Head Start program, the senior center. So my responsibilities interacted and incorporated with the activities with most of these programs and with many of the staff and with a high number of clients in person. So I understand the plight of many people. I've served on the UVI Eastern Caribbean Center Advisory Committee for over 20 years. I've also served on the advisory committee for the census dating back to 1993. I've been given an opportunity in my professional and personal life to give to the community, to be intimately aware of the issues and the dynamics that impact the Virgin Islands, both in government. I'm a procurement expert. I'm also a licensed arbitrator. There's many hats that I've worn over the years, and I invite everyone to visit our website. My resume and our background and so forth are there. We're in a very peculiar time. Our level of corruption
Now, before you go further, I wanted to actually quickly,
Yes.
so that we can all understand exactly why are you running as
yes,
governor?
yes,
What what is your reason for running?
I made a early decision when I returned to the Virgin Islands in 1993 that at some future date I would like to offer myself for public service in a way that aligns with my ability and my skills. I have been a senior executive in the public sector and in the private sector for approximately 27 years. And I believe that the time has come at this juncture to offer myself as an alternative to what hasn't been working. And for that reason, I'm running. Additionally, we have some specific choices to make. We could either decide as young Virgin Islanders, and I still consider myself young, although my daughter and my nephews and nieces may differ, but I still consider myself young.
Okay.
I turned 50 in November of last year. As young Virgin Islanders, we have to decide either we exercise some courage, step forward into a space that requires our talent and our input and our abilities to make a difference. So, or we decide that we'll stay in our small corners, talk about the problems that plague us, call on the radio station and say what's wrong, and nothing changes. So I believe that it's my fundamental responsibility as a person who cares about my child, who cares about my family and others here in the Virgin Islands, to present myself as a candidate because I believe that we have, when I say we, my running mate and I have the requisite balance of love for this community, demonstrated love for this community, professional ability and qualities and character to offer a viable alternative to the recycling of the same old stuff that hasn't been working. So that is in a nutshell.
Let me ask you this, 'cause I want to jump right into it so we can get the issues out. Recent times we've had the governor submit once again a request to borrow to carry us through, or else once again he'll have to lay people off. What is your plan for revenue generation for the territory?
Well, I'm hearing a two-point question.
No, you're only hearing one.
Well, I say why here two-point because you led with the question of borrowing, and then you're asking what's our plan, or my plan specifically for. So let me say for the record, since
Okay.
you led with that, the Smith-Frederick team did not and does not support the proposed $169 million borrowing as the primary alternative to meeting the gap.
Okay.
Okay, we didn't support that. And without going, and to that effect, we issued a public press statement to that. So I just want to make that clear for the record. When we speak about the revenue generation, there's a couple segments of that we need to look at. The first part of that is that the government, we have a $4.5 to $5 billion documented economy.
Documented what?
Economy.
Okay.
Okay. Some would argue that we have another amount of undocumented dollars that flow through our territory. Of that, there's approximately 1.7, 1.2 to 1.7, depending on the year, of appropriated and unappropriated dollars that flow into this government. When we look at the conditions of the product of that, it's clear, in my view, that there is significant waste, there is significant abuse, and as a result, one thing that has to happen is that there has to be reform. Once we look at squeezing a lot of the waste out of government, once we look at consolidating a lot of the operational areas in government that really bleeds a lot of money out from the territory. When we look at the leakage in our economy, there's tremendous leakage in our economy. One must then ask, how do we look comprehensively at restructuring, both from our tax base and our collections and the efficiencies in government around a model that would allow us to become investor friendly. Our corruption is a big issue around that. Now, there are certain things that we can look at. For example, WAPA is a big issue. Okay, a lot of the money that the government receives goes into primarily operations. So if there's a $30 million shy, as I believe was reported, most of that money is shy for government operations. It's not money shy for bringing in new investors. It's not money shy for anything else. So what we need to look at clearly is how do we reform our operations? How do we make our operation more streamlined? Yes, sir.
From what I'm gathering,
I'm listening.
you're gifted. I think you're good with words. But simply, you've said waste, corruption. Those are all answers that we have continued to hear over and over again. When do we say, okay, yes, waste and corruption are there. We work on them, yes. But what about putting things in place that are going to bring dollars, real dollars to the territory, and not dollars that we generate in the territory, but bringing outside dollars in and growing our economy so we can actually start to grow salaries and make and growing our middle class.
The two are linked, and in that regard, I think we have a philosophical shift.
Okay.
The two are linked. We cannot talk about growing our economy until we stop the bleeding, and part of that bleeding
Until we start to do what?
stop our bleeding.
Oh, stop it.
Okay, and part of that bleeding has to do with our issues around corruption and waste, mismanagement and abuse. For example, if it costs $1 to do a particular task, we can't do it on 30 cents. It's impossible. So if we're saying then as a combination of waste, mismanagement, and some would argue, and I think in recent times we can argue that, corruption, that if 70 of that 30 cents is leaking, is not going to where it's applied to, we cannot talk about economic development until, so it has to be a strategic wraparound. Now, there are many things that we can look at in terms of economic development, but those are midterm to strategic solutions.
So, let me okay.
Some of these are midterm.
Well, let me
to
ask
strategic
it this way, because I'm not quite sure that I am buying into your thought process in regards to the economic issue. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I think you can do both. You can work on the public.
I think we're saying the same thing.
But here's what I want to understand.
Okay.
I get the public corruption issue. I get the leakage issue. I get all of those things. But my question was clear. What are your plans for revenue generation?
Okay.
So presume that you've handled the public corruption issue. What is the plan for revenue generation?
Well,
how are you going to bring dollars into the territory that's not already here and being leaked?
Number one, and this is on our website from January of last year, under our strategic economic development approach, there are several elements that speak to our plan. The first is expanding our tourism base, particularly for stayover tourism on the island of St. Croix. And under stayover tourism, we're speaking to not only the traditional hotel type developments, but we're also speaking to niche market tourism development, ecotourism, and agritourism. Additionally, we're looking at, we've identified agribusiness as an element that we need to move toward, particularly for the island of St. Croix. Thirdly, St. Croix has a wonderful harbor, and I should say port. And there's been much discussion over the years about transshipment and specifically since the Panama Canal and other, and that development should be coming online. So when we look at developing transshipment, making certain areas a duty-free zone, when we look at such things as expanding our marketing base around tourism and integrating much more with the CARICOM nations and the Caribbean, particularly for trade. Additionally, financial service is an area that we would like to leverage on. with Global Crossing, with NextGen, with some of the EDC revisions EDC reforms that we would be looking at to make the Virgin Islands much more competitive in the areas of financial services, captive insurance, and so forth. We see those as new money coming in to the territory. I say, and I keep going back to the matter of culture, because we must develop and sustain an investor climate that individuals feel, those who want to invest, feel that the Virgin Islands is business efficient. It's not going to take 6 months to get a business license. It's not going to take a year to get regular processing things done. That it wouldn't be a requirement, an informal requirement, to pay a premium to government officials or others in that space to do business in Virgin Islands. That's why I keep mentioning that it's not exclusive. It's tied to the same. Investors, particularly in the global market that we are living in now, people have choices as to where to place their money and to develop their projects. We're competing, and most recently Puerto Rico is really trying to move or sway our EDC beneficiaries over to Puerto Rico. They're offering a suite of tax benefits that some may argue whether they're sustainable over the long term, but they're offering them, and as a result of those benefits, people are moving. We have to look at how do we make the Virgin Islands business efficient, but also have the integrity in how we do our processes that people trust us.
You spoke about CARICOM. Can you
Yes.
speak specifically what you intend to do with CARICOM and how you intend to do that?
Yes, I can.
Before you finish that, we'll take a quick break.
Okay.
And have you answer that question so we
Okay.
get back. Yeah, we'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to VI Voices. We have with us Moleto Smith Jr., who is seeking a seat as our governor in the 2014 general election. And before we went on break, Boyd, you were asking Mr. Smith what?
About CARICOM. You spoke about CARICOM. I wanted to know specifically what do you intend to do with CARICOM and how do you intend to do that?
Well, specifically speaking, I believe that the Smith-Frederick administration, the Smith-Frederick administration will pursue associate membership with CARICOM, particularly for three primary reasons. I think regional trade is important. With the advent of the Panama Canal coming online, with the advent of what would be a logistical transshipment location on St. Croix, I think a relationship with CARICOM as an associate member would bode well economically.
Now, for the people who are watching the show, explain what an associate member of CARICOM is.
Well, an associate member of CARICOM is a relationship with CARICOM that is not full membership. Individual island nations in the Caribbean, most of them, are part of what we call the Caribbean community, which is known as CARICOM. In the Eastern Caribbean islands, that section of CARICOM is known as the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, or OECS. Currently, there are two island territories that have associate membership with CARICOMs because they are not independent island nations. And those two island territories are the British Virgin Islands and Anguilla. Given that the United States Virgin Island is not an independent sovereign entity, the associate membership would be the direction that the Smith-Frederick administration would seek.
Okay.
Cultural exchange, intellectual exchange, etc., in terms of growing our intellectual base, would be well benefited from that relationship.
Mr. Smith,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say this. Paramount to us going forward, several issues are very important to us.
Okay.
One, revenue generation. Two, I recall as a child when I lived here, when I moved here, St. Croix was a major port, a major island in the Caribbean that Eastern Caribbean persons would come to. And when they came, they would go to Superfood, they buy up all the stuff, and they would be going back all over the Caribbean on boats.
Yes.
So, cost of living, we have to bring those things down. Now, how do you intend to grow economy, encourage trade within the rest of the Caribbean, and bring cost of living down, all within the climate that we are presently facing in the Virgin Islands?
Okay, so
Economic climate.
Okay, so you're asking 3 questions.
Yeah, I'm asking
Okay,
three.
which-
I didn't disguise any of them, but we'll work them out. We'll say three.
Which would you like me to
Okay,
begin with?
how do you go about bringing cost of living down in the Virgin Islands so we can actually live here and don't have to flee and go someplace else?
Okay. Cost of living, in my view, is influenced by, currently, number one, our cost of energy. Okay, our energy cost is exorbitantly high. As a result, everything that spins off of prime energy has an added cost associated to it. Number two, it's impacted by our situation in terms of our shipping. Okay? Everything that comes in to the Virgin Islands has to be shipped based on our status as a shipping port. That there's an added cost that's particularly for pharmaceuticals, electronics, and those types of things that are cost of living dependent, medications. Number three, our cost of living is impacted primarily to the flight of companies that employ and hire people from the Virgin Islands, and it becomes what we call a positive cycle. Because the energy costs are high, businesses flee. When businesses flee, for a number of reasons, the cost of everything goes up. So we recommend the transshipment piece. I think would speak to the ability to look at controlling or reducing our shipping costs. Transshipment, bundling our transshipment with a duty-free zone for certain types of items coming in, working with the delegate or federal folks for our Jones Act exemptions that many are seeking would impact the cost of shipping. The issues with WAPA are much more complex, simply because the government and through WAPA and through the legislature has moved in a direction that we're moving to a tri-fuel scenario, and those activities and contracts are already in place. Surprisingly, just today, my lieutenant governor candidate and I had a very involved meeting with an energy expert, and one has to consider whether this approach over a long period of time would actually reduce our rates.
With Tibar?
Excuse me?
With Tibar, are you referring to?
No, I'm talking to the current proposal for the diversification, simply because if it is true that the primary cost for energy production is the fuel, is the cost of fuel, when solar and other alternatives come online, the non-fuel aspects of power generation are cut. But the fuel side of it is still an overhead administrative cost. So we'll have to look generally in how do we, now whether it's propane or whether it's diesel, over a period of time the market will levelize, and the cost of propane, if everyone goes on propane, will elevate, and it may or may not over a sustained period of time reduce our energy cost. So we'll really have to look at the intricacies of the power generation. Now, I think that of power generation, if we're still maintaining the fuel side, which at present is about $300 million a year, and we're taking the reclaimed heat portion of power generation off the grid because solar and other are taking up that cost, and then we have a concern to look at in terms of how we deal with that. Okay. And I think I spoke earlier and I know we are short of time. I spoke earlier about my plans for economic development. So I think I spoke to the revenue generation piece. And to the heart of this, we must deal with waste and mismanagement and those kind of things, because a lot of our decisions in terms of the
So you're
direction we
saying
go.
the manner in which you're going to develop our economic base, or make it better, I should say, would be to bring in big businesses? Or
No,
seek
no, no, no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying fundamentally we must diversify our economy.
And how do we do so? But
Well, we have
we
a
don't have a diverse economy right now enough? As
no,
it is?
no, our economy is not diverse. We do not, as a local community, have much stake in our economy.
We don't.
Okay,
I would agree to that.
So when we say about diversifying our economy, it has to be diversifying our economy in ways that influence and increase local participation in the economic space.
But how would we do that when we don't offer the same things to small businesses here in the territory that we offer to big businesses in the territory?
Simply by reversing what you just said.
Okay.
Okay, we will have to look at how do we incentivize our small business, provide the small business wraparound support, transform the government development bank into a bank that meets the needs of small business owners
Well, here's a clearer question. Why won't the small businesses get the 90% tax breaks that the big businesses get?
Well,
Who can actually afford to pay their taxes?
At present, as you know, I can't answer that question.
Why?
Is your question why don't they or why couldn't they?
Why couldn't they? If
Well,
you went in there, why would you support? Wait, if you became governor, would you support that our local businesses, which I believe small business in a local economy is the foundation to growing anybody's economy? Would you support that these local small businesses would get those kinds of benefits, those 80-90% benefits that we give to these larger companies?
I support that, and I think our position on that has been clear for over a year. Yes, we support that. We'd have to look at the criteria for that participation to ensure that that there's full compliance and full participation, not only for the small businesses, but for the EDC and other companies that get those benefits now are compliant. And that goes back to the point I said in terms of mismanagement. There is little comprehensive oversight over many of these programs as relates to the purported requirements for many of these companies who receive these benefits to hire, to do their social and corporate responsibilities, etc. But the short answer is yes.
Okay.
We would support
And
that.
so then you would necessarily, because you talked about the EDC, EDA, and you also talked about, there necessarily is a lax in oversight and making sure that the people comply with the benefits they're already getting. But that's on a higher level because, the EDA do have those compliant officers that work extremely hard and that they do all they're supposed to do.
The truth is that
But
they
when you
understand.
get to the higher levels, like the EDA asking for more money, but you have all these businesses who owe them $5 and $6 and $7 million, and nobody's going after them.
But what is that a result of? Mismanagement.
Right.
Poor compliance.
But as the governor, you would have control as to who's on that board.
Well,
correct.
First of all, we're proposing. We would propose a restructuring of the current relationship of the EDC right now in terms of how it reports. We are proposing presenting an operational model, not only for the EDA, but WAP and many of the other quasi-government entities that professionalizes these, in a codified way, professionalizes these boards so that we don't have a recurrent problem after our administration leaves. We are proposing, we also are proposing certain, which I'm not going to disclose at this minute because we're in the middle of a campaign. We are also proposing some structural recommendations and reforms that deal specifically to independence in ethics and reporting and looking at elements dealing specifically with corruption in contracts, etc., that would be completely independent and outside of the direct control of the office of the governor.
Now, you said you won't disclose it because you're in the middle of a campaign.
Well, I won't disclose.
When would you disclose it?
Well, we will be issuing a public position paper on those recommendations within the next week and a half.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir.
You talked about diversifying the economy, and you mentioned that agribusiness is one of those things that we can diversify your economy with.
Yes, that's correct.
Would you support either legalization of marijuana or decriminalization of marijuana as a way of advancing our agribusiness within the Virgin Islands? Are you taking consideration hemp and medicinal marijuana? What position would you support and why?
I will give you I will restate our position. And this has been our position for several months, and more recently in the last forums that this is our position. In concept, I support the medical use of marijuana. The medical community, depending on what journals we read and what scientific reviews are split. But in concept, I support the medicinal use of marijuana. At this point, I do not support the recreational use of marijuana. I do not believe that we have the social system infrastructure in place to deal with the substance abuse and other issues that are current. I do not support the recreational use. I do not support, and as such, the extension then is that I don't support at this time the decriminalization of it, because it is well documented that marijuana use is a gateway drug, and at present we don't even have detox facilities in the Virgin Islands. We don't have a number of other things in the Virgin Islands that, at this moment, right now, I don't support it.
Mr. Smith, no, it's well documented. No, these are the same people who said tobacco was safe. Those are the same people who document that marijuana is a gateway drug and all these different things. But let me say this: you have a human services background, yes? Am I correct, sir?
I work in human services. Yeah.
So you've been exposed to YRC, the Boys and Girls Home, and at times we see how many young lives are hampered by a marijuana offense, and how futures are somewhat snuffed out.
If only it was that simple.
It's not that simple?
It's not that simple. Many of our young folks are hampered by a lack of a neighborhood and a lack of good parental involvement, and a lack of mentoring and taking our children under their wing so that they have good, feasible opportunity and alternative. They're not hampered simply because they decide to smoke weed. Okay, I beg to differ.
No, I think I'm not saying that. Well, it's that simple when the when the legal system put them in jail for a small amount of marijuana, and you put them down. They're done on a road already.
I guess we just have a philosophical impasse.
But we seem to have a lot of philosophical impasses, because here's my concern. We have this issue with marijuana, and I can tell you, I go to court, and in a jury box are about 15, 16 young boys who have charged with simple possession of marijuana, 2 or 3 or 4 butts of whatever you call them, of joints.
Yeah.
They don't have money to hire lawyers, so the court has to appoint lawyers. They don't have money for bail, so they can't come out, and they sit there. The AG's office know full well they're not going to send that little amount of stuff to be tested, which the law requires you must have it chemically tested in order to prove your case. Right? Which costs a whole bunch of money. By the time you're finished with one person, the government has spent almost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to prosecute a 19-year-old boy for having 2 joints. Right? Okay. Multiply that by 10 or 15 of them that all come in at once. Right? I understand your position in regards to recreational use, and I get that, and I think, but what concerns me is that when we talk about the issue of marijuana, people automatically go to thinking potheads. People just want to smoke just to smoke. And I'm not quite sure that that is the actual approach that we should take in the discussion regarding marijuana.
Well,
Medicinal marijuana, last week, 2 weeks ago, we had this conversation. I'm not finished. 2 weeks ago, we had this conversation, and you said a safe answer, and I said to you, well, the answer is what it is. But, in hindsight, I think about the fact that when people say, well, I am for medicinal marijuana, it's safe because we think about medicinal marijuana to help people get better. And so I guess my concern is if we're looking at budget shortfalls and we're looking at Colorado, who's given us a landscape to look at least a roadmap to look at. We don't have to do everything they've done, but a roadmap where they have made millions of dollars in the first month alone. Why would we not at least consider the possibility of decriminalizing it, which is different from legalizing it, but decriminalizing it in the territory?
Let me say that because I don't want anyone to walk away with an interpretation of what I didn't say. Okay, I think it's very clear what I said, and I'm going to say it again. What I said is that I do not support at this time the decriminalization or the legalization of recreational use of marijuana. I didn't speak anything to what the future would hold as it relates to the information, the data that would come in specific to the Virgin Islands that may or may not support that. But at this particular time, right now, I do not support that based on those reasons. Now, I concur from a juvenile justice and even a justice system approach that there are disparities. I concur that there are failures in our justice system as it relates to how cases are handled and as it relates to how the process work that gives delay and doesn't and may impact our poor youth and those from poor circumstance in ways that are disparaging. I concur with that, but it does not shift my position as it stands right now as it relates to the data and the research that is lacking at this particular point. Colorado went through a process. I'm quite familiar with it. I read the law. I've met with the VI normal folks here in the Virgin Islands, both the president and some others, reviewing those issues around marijuana. So I'm not speaking of this simply out of a vacuum. There are high-intensity drug trafficking relationships that we have to also concern with because the Virgin Island is a high-intensity drug trafficking spot. Okay, and so the federal relations, those other things are things that must come into discussion, and we must analyze and look at how that total package would impact that decision, if in fact that decision is to be made.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a few moments with Mr. Smith. Back in a moment. Welcome back to VI Voices. We've been having a very spirited discussion with Mr. Moleto Smith, who again is, as I said earlier, is seeking the office of Governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands in the 2014 general election. And we just finished up a conversation with with marijuana, whether the decriminalization or the legalization of it. And you were going to ask him.
Right. I was going to ask you this. You spoke about earlier, initially, when you first got here, about grassroots campaign.
Yes.
Define grassroots for me, please.
Quite simple. Grassroots is the average, everyday person that lives in the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
The individuals who live in the Virgin Islands, who I would say is part of that middle class and below.
Middle class and below. Okay, fine. No.
Not to say that folks who are middle class and up are not.
Of course. I got you. I understand.
May not have grassroots.
I understand what you're saying. No. We had a consensus in 2010. Mm-hmm. Based on this consensus, it's that 80% of the people living here is black people or people from African ancestry.
Yes.
We live in a democratic society, correct?
Yes, we do.
That means majority rule.
Yes, we do.
So, if the majority of the people is 80% African people, what do you propose, or what do you intend to do for those people? What do you think the needs are that's necessary for those 80% people?
I'm not quite clear on your question.
What do you think is necessary, especially economically, for these 80% of the people to move forward or to develop this community?
I think it goes back to a point I made earlier, and I'll just restate it. Okay. When you say this community, speaking St. Croix. Okay. We have 33% of our people living at or below poverty. 66% of them are on this island of St. Croix, and it has been so for a very long time. In order, and I believe that that demographic falls into the 80% that we're speaking to. We have to engage our people in the economic opportunity space.
How do you do that?
Well, for one, let me speak to housing for example. I'll speak to housing first because within a short time,
right.
I'll restate a proposal that I indicated in the last interview I did. Most of the housing communities in the Virgin Islands were built back in the early 1950s. 60s? No, early 1950s. I did looked at them. Most of them, PMP and many others, came up in 1954. The federal interest in most of them have already waned. Many individuals are third and fourth, some fifth generation in close to living in these spaces. So the question, one element of wealth we know is tied to home ownership. I think that we can look at a process of limited equity cooperatives for many of our folks in that space. In 1994, 1995, the Housing Authority, the VI Housing Authority, received some demonstration grants. Was one of 5 entities around the country that received demonstration grants to turn Harlem Pearson Garden into a cooperative, where all of the housing community wasn't turned, approximately one half of it was. I think that we need to look at those kind of approaches so that individuals could begin to develop immediate wealth.
How do you educate the people or the masses on that?
Well, we have to embark on a public education campaign.
Okay.
We have to do that, but the campaign can't just be to say that we are doing that, but really engage people and engage the community in very robust but comprehensive way.
So do you support changing the curriculum, the current curriculum? You think that's necessary to do?
I think our curriculum should be enhanced. Okay? I think in 2 particular ways. Now, number one, it should focus heavily on Caribbean and Afro-Caribbean history. I believe firmly in that. Secondly, I believe that it should begin earlier to teach languages to our young people, even from grade 3, because we are in a global community, and that child, once they come out of this system, will have to compete internationally with folks. Thirdly, I believe that the curriculum should include business training from the 6th or 7th grade. By the time a person graduates, they should know how to write a business plan. They should know how to do general business marketing, and those things that would ready them for a business of their own, whether they decide to go forward in a trade business or to go into higher education in college. So that's in a half a minute. That's my response.
Yes, okay. Now, so that what is clear, let us know, where can you be found? Because we only have a short time on the show, so we can't get to everything. So that they can actually review your plans and probably talk to you some more. Where can you be found, or where can they get this information?
Okay, Moleto Smith for Governor.com. That's MOLETO Smith for Governor.com. Our Facebook page is Moleto A Smith Jr. for Governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The website the Facebook page is also linked to the website. Our platforms, everything about our candidacy, including our positions on most things, are on the website. Our headquarters on St. Croix is at number 71 Peters Rest. It is immediately opposite of the Waste Management Recycling Center in Peters Rest. Our headquarters on St. Croix is immediately east. On St. Thomas is immediately east of the Windward Passage. We call it the Sunshine Building because the building is yellow with blue trim.
Okay. And any place else?
No. And we have general meetings on St. Croix on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On St. Thomas every Thursday. We'll be issuing our robust calendar this week because we just revised it. And I encourage everyone to go on our website, show your support, vote number 6 in the Democratic primary, Moleto A. Smith Jr. and Hubert Lorenzo Frederick for governor and lieutenant governor.
Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate this. Assuming that you make it to the primary, we'll have you back with your running mate so that we can have some more questions of you. And so we want to thank you for appearing on Their Voices tonight. And we'll see if you come back after August 2nd.
I feel confident we will be back.
Okay. Well,
Even if it's midnight August 2nd.
Okay, well,
I figure the results are in by then.
Well, I'm sure this time you're very talkative, Lieutenant Governor. Running mate will be on the show with us so we can actually question him a lot more.
Well,
see how that goes.
We like to educate and engage our community.
There we go. We want to thank you for listening in and tuning in tonight. As you know, we have our Rock Your Voice campaign in which we want to make sure that we inform all of you about the issues and the people who are asking for your vote, and hope that you will take what is your responsibility to question the people who are asking for your vote. It is your duty and your responsibility to do so. And any individual seeking your vote doesn't want to answer your questions, then more than likely those are not the people that you should be voting for. And so we're asking you go out. If you're not registered, that you register. Go out and vote so that your voices can be heard. Good night, everybody.